Okay, hello students. We are now going to do a brief tutorial on how to get a Lego figure into Blender, because Lego figures make powerful personalities so that we can make everything awesome in the world. It illustrates a few techniques that are useful in Blender for setting up your landscapes, and rather than trying to put in figures that are full meshes or that you create yourself into the landscapes that you're modifying, it is easy to use this great program called MLCAD and bring in some Lego figures, and then you can populate the landscape with them. It's also a lot of fun, and it helps messaging with kids. This MLCAD program is a Lego program, and you want to go down to minifigures. There it is, minifig, and open that up. And there's a lot of different stuff in there. The sorting doesn't work as well as I like, so I just scroll down and I find the minifigure and find a head and start there. There's hair, and you can see there's all sorts of stuff in there. But let's start with the minifigure head of not an alien squid man or an elf. Let's do a minifigure female head with brown eyebrows. So you just drag that into the scene there. And then let's get a torso. So go down to minifigure torso. And they have different ones: blue vest, blouse. Let's do a blouse and a necklace pattern and just drag that in. Do not join them. You could join the figures and they will snap, but then you'll have trouble animating if you choose to animate. I'd rather do that in Blender. So put that minifigure torso in, and then look for minifigure hips and legs. And if you do that, then the legs won't animate easily. So let's just start with hips and bring in the hips. And now we can go down to minifigure legs, and here's a leg left, which we can put in. And here we go to minifigure leg right. These are the basic legs. And then, of course, we're going to need arms. So we scroll back up. And here's an arm left, and then minifigure arm right. It's the next one. Okay, so that's our bigger figure, and we need hands, I guess. Feathers, hair, hand, there it is. So let's put a hand here. And another hand over here. Now, by keeping everything separate, then you have the option of animating later on. So now we want to select everything, and that's just dragging a bounding box around it. And all the parts are selected, and we're going to save. And it would be really nice if we could use the export feature. For some reason, it's not working in mine, so I'm going to call this mini figure separated 2. I've done one before, and save it in a folder that I know. You should be able to go in and export your model, but when I try, it fails to create the file. So I don't use MLCAD to do my exporting. I've saved it as an MLCAD file, a model file, and having saved it as that, I now go into another program that came with MLCAD, which you can find online. It's free software, and that is called LD View. And in LD View, I open up my figure. There it is. And now I export from LD View. And I hit export, and I pick STL. There's POV or POV race scene file. There's STL stereolithography file and 3ds 3D Studio file. I use STL. That's the extension for when you want to 3D print. So if you want to 3D print Lego parts you can just do them from this model. And then it also enables you to import into Blender. And so I will do the export as the STL. I guess I already did that. And yeah, I did that. And then we're done with those programs, the LD View and the MLCAD. And now we can open up Blender. And we can import it. Before I import, a couple of things I want to do to set up the scene. The first thing is I hit X to delete the box that's there, and I move the camera so it's in a good position for rendering or making movies. And so with the camera, let me open up the properties window here by clicking on that plus sign there. Okay. There's another way to get at this. Instead of hitting the plus sign here, you can hit N on the keyboard. The N key toggles open the properties window. Now I'm going to go and move the location of the camera, and it's going to be in X0. It's going to be in Y of -8, which pulls it to the back of my plane here. And then the Z is going to be left at the default of 5.34. That's fine. Then the rotation of the camera, I'm going to rotate in X by 68 degrees, and the Z defaults at 46. I don't want that. I'm going to make that 0. Then I'm going to lock my camera position and rotation, so I don't have to worry about that. Then the light, I actually want 3 lights. So I'm going to start with the first light, and I'm going to put it at a location of X equals 0, and that's going to be also Y equals 0, and it's going to be at a Z of 6. That's very close to where it was, and I'm going to lock that light in position. And then I'm going to duplicate that light by hitting Shift D. And of course it won't let me move because I've locked it, so don't lock your light. Alright, so now I'm moving that light. And the next position for that light that I'm going to use is the light that I created here. This light is my it's in 3-point lighting system. I'm blanking on the name right now, but it's the one that gives relief and separates the subject from its background a little. Then I want to have a key light, which is where the camera is. So for my key light, I'm going to have X equals 0, and then I'm going to have Y equals -8. So it's back where the camera is, and then the Z is going to be 6, so it's just above the camera height there. And then I'm going to duplicate light again. Actually, let me lock that one. So that's in place. Now I'm going to duplicate this light again. Let me unlock it to duplicate it. And let me go back and lock that light. Locking is helpful so that you don't accidentally move objects while you're moving around. That can happen in Blender a lot. Let me hit the 7 key to go into the bird's eye or top view, and hit the 5 key to make it orthogonal. And let me move that light to an X of -3.5 and my Y back at -6. And then my Z can stay at 6. And that gives me my fill light. So this isn't a really good 3-point lighting system, but it's at least got a bit of what we need. That is to say, we have a light back where the camera is, which is the key light. Then we've got the fill light, and then we've got this overhead light to add some relief from the background. Now, the next thing that I like to do here, let me hit A to deselect things, is I want to put a plane in so we're not just floating out in space, put a floor down. To do that, I'm going to go to Add Mesh Plane, and make sure that the plane's location's at 0, 0, 0 and lock that in place. And then in terms of the scales, let me lock the rotation too. I don't want that plane to rotate. For the scale, I'm going to scale it out in x by 8 so that it covers the entire grid here that is in space, and I'm going to use y of 8 also. There is no dimension in z, and let me lock that scale. So now there's my plane, and it's not going anywhere, and I have my camera and my 3 lights set up. Also, it's fun to give the plane a material, so I'm hitting new here, and green grass is sometimes fun. Change the color, make it a darker green. All right, so I've got that grassy plane there, and I hit A to deselect it. So that's my setup. Let's go ahead and save this scene. Save this and as Lego import. All right. Now I'm going to bring my Lego figure in, but I'm going to bring my Lego figure in another layer so that I can work with the Lego figure, because I have to put him back together, that Humpty Dumpty. So you see that orange dot, that indicates there's something present in layer 1. Layer 2 is empty, and that's fine. Now I'm going to go to File and Import, and I'm going to go to STL. Oops. And in my Models folder, we have minifigures separated to STL. Double-click on that, and the figure comes in, as you can see, but it comes in lying on its belly. So to rotate him, I go to the rotation of the X, because you see the X line here, this red line is the X line. So I'm going to rotate him about that line, and I'm going to do that 270 degrees, and he stands up. I'm going to also notice that he is cut by the grid, and I want to move him up. It's about, if you move him up, it's about 2.5 or so. Then we can adjust it. So actually, so it's a little more here for this guy. It depends on how you built your model and where the center of your model is. So let's move him up. And in this case, it looks like it's 3.2 roughly when he's standing on the plane. All right, now the next thing we have to do, we can turn actually both on to see how he stands by shift-clicking here. And there he is on the plane with the camera. And see if the camera sees what we want to see by hitting the 0 key, and we see what the camera sees. So it's pretty good, except of course he's not all together. So I'm going to just click on the second layer. So I'm working the second layer. Let me move out of this again. And I got to now separate all of this, because this is a single object. You see, if I were to select any part of it, it ends up selecting all. And I need each part to be able to be moved separately. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edit mode, which I can get to from here by going there, or I can hit the tab key. The tab key takes us into object mode to edit mode. Go to edit mode and hit A to deselect everything. And now I'm going to click on a single point in the head, and I'm going to then go to in select. I'm going to select similar, or I can select more or less. But selecting similar doesn't select all that I want to select in this. There is select all by trait, select more or less, and you can continue to select more, but it's also selecting part of the arm for some reason. So what I found is the best thing, and it's not easy to find in the menus, is just hit Control L when you selected a piece. And this is how you get the head to be separate. Now to turn it into a separate object, I can't find any menu item that allows me to do that, but I've learned from other tutorials that what you do is you hit P, and then it says separate by selection, and now we've got the head as a separate object. And when you go into object mode, hitting tab, you can just select the head now. So I need to do that to each of the pieces. So now the head is a separate object. I'm right-clicking on the rest of the mesh, and it's all together. So I'm going to go into edit mode again. And here's where it gets just a little bit tricky. Take your B, hit B to get a bounding box, and select the torso. And see, when you try to move it, there's a lot of other parts that weren't selected. So you need to select everything here. If you hit the Z key, you go into a X-ray view of it, and you can see that not all the meshes got selected. So let's deselect again, hit the bounding box in this mode, and now it looks like it selected everything. You can check it by hitting G, and if it all moves together, then it's been selected. So now hit P to separate the selection, and now that's a separate object, as verified when you go into the object mode. So you do the same thing. We're right-clicking now on that. They're all joined. Go into edit mode by hitting tab. Click a single point here. Hit Control L to get all of it. And we're still missing a part. So shift right-click to try to get the rest. That may be hard. Hit your bounding box. Now we've selected it all. See if when you move it, it's all together. All right, hit P by selection, and you have another arm. Tab out. Notice that now you've got these parts selected. Go ahead and select the rest and go through the same procedure again. Hit tab to go into edit mode, click a single point, and then hit Control L, but that doesn't get everything. Hit another point, hit Control L, now I've got the whole thing. That was one technique for doing it. The other way for doing it was to use the bounding box, and then once you have the bounding box, hit P, separate selection, and you're done with that. And now we're going to do the same thing. We tab out, deselect, and we're going to just keep selecting each part. Hit tab to go into edit, hit A to get everything unselected, click on a point here, or use the bounding box. Sometimes when you click on a point and you hit Control L, you can continue by hitting Shift and hitting Control L, hitting Shift, right-clicking, hitting Control L, hitting Shift. You can just do this painstaking process, but the bounding box by hitting B is, of course, much faster as long as you are in the X-ray mode. Once again, we got into the X-ray mode by hitting the Z key. I hit Z, and it takes me into the X-ray mode. If we've ascertained that we have that whole part, again, hit P by selection. See the P there? And you're done with that. Tab out, hit A to deselect. Now let's do the hands. Lots of practice here. So we go into edit mode with tab, and we use the bounding box. Grab it, make sure we have everything. Yes, we do. Hit P, separate by selection, then tab back into object mode, hit A to deselect. Now click on the remaining, right-click on the remaining objects that are all bound together, and hit tab to get into edit mode, B for bounding box, grab it, hit P to select it, done with that, tab out, hit A to deselect, select your next two, and hit tab to get into edit mode, use B to grab, and now hit P to separate by selection and tab out. And now you've got all the objects independent so they can be moved together. It does help now at this point to go in and name your parts. So if I click here on the head, you see over here in the view of the scene, it says minifigure separated 0.001. I'm going to call that head. Then This one here, minifigure separated 002, I'm going to call that torso. And then this one here is the right arm, so we'll say right arm, and then right click, left arm, and then the hips, and then the right hand, and then the left hand, and then we got the left arm, we got the right arm, we have the right leg, and then the left leg. You see the lamps are named here. If I were to shift click on the other layer, then we can see where our lamps are. This lamp here is lamp 1. I'm going to call that the key lamp. And then this one here, which I right click, I'm going to call the fill lamp. And then the one that's over the figure's head, which actually stuck in the head right now, I'm going to call the, I forget what the name is, but overhead lamp. Okay, so I've got everything now sorted through. You can see here you can view all scenes, current scene, visible layers, selected. So overlap is the only one showing there. If I go visible layers, then everything shows up. But if I only look at this layer, then all that you see now is overhead lamp, full lamp, plane, key lamp, and camera. And if I activate the second layer, then you see I can work just with the Lego figure. And it's nice that you can select by name. That can keep things organized. So now we're going to put the figure together. And we don't need to be in X-ray mode, so I'm going to hit Z and move the figure's mesh down. Sometimes it does help to be in the X-ray mode so you can see how the meshes join. It makes it more accurate, so maybe I will stay in. And I can move this figure down like that and move the arm in. Now here you see the interesting thing that each of these has a different, they all have the same center, and that's not useful for animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the head. The center's way down here in the belly. I'm going to go to Object. I'm in Object mode. I'm going to go to Object. I'm going to go Transform, and I'm going to transform the origin to the geometry, and that puts the origin from where we can pivot the head right in the center of the head. Similarly with this, torso, object, transform, origin to geometry, puts it right in the center. Do that with every object so that each has its origin at a point that makes it easier to animate. Transform the origin to geometry. Now we can move it better into there. The reason for that, like with the arm, is if we were rotating the arm, when you rotate the arm now, it rotates along that pivot point, that origin point. If the hand's pivot point is in the center and you try to rotate it, then the hand is going, whoa, you don't know how to move the hand. So once I have transformed the geometry origin to geometry, now when I want to move the hand, I can rotate it locally. And you can play with the position of it if you like. So once again, if I want to rotate this, see how it's swinging from the torso. That's not how our wrists work. So transform that origin to geometry. Same thing here. Transform origin to geometry. And transform origin to geometry, transform origin to geometry. Okay, let's just save this a second. It's a lot of work, obviously, preparing for your scene. The legs are on the ground, so let's move the hips down onto the legs. And to get in that view, I hit the 1 key to get into the front view. If I hit the 5 key, I have perspective. If I hit the 5 key again, I have orthogonal. I want to be in orthogonal for doing these manipulations. Makes it easier. And let me move the torso right along the line, that blue line, which is the Z line. It makes it easier for me to coordinate. And then I attach my figure. Actually, that mesh view shows me this X-ray view that I wasn't quite in line. It's one of the advantages of it. Let's see. Torso needs to be just slightly down there. All right, everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of a team. So moving the figure down, let's move that over. There we go. The arm. Hit the G key, you can move stuff faster, but sometimes you get out of line. So you should toggle again with various views. 7 key helps you do a top view. The 1 key is a front view. The 3 key is a side view. And then you can use your middle mouse button to sort of move around. So once again, I'm going to use the 1 key to get to the front view. Bring this in. Use the 7 key to get to the top view. Make sure that he's in okay. We can play with all that. 1 key, move this down. It came in fairly good, but then you got this issue here when you're on the, I'm using the 3 key now. Let's get the head down for a second. Let's just get that head on. There, I was slightly off. Let's hit the 1 key, move in, make sure that the head is on. Okay, and the arms now are the problematic one right now. So hitting the 7 key, moving the arm into its basic, I mean the hand into its basic position. Let's get that other hand. But when we go to the 3 key, we see that there needs to be some rotation. And that's where that pivot point is so crucial, because now that the pivot point is there, we can rotate and move. If it had been in its original position, then it never would have rotated properly. So there's a little bit of monkeying around to do to get the figure into the right place. You can toggle out of the X-ray view with the Z key, and then you can get a better idea of how to rotate. And move that hand into position. I'm hitting the R key, by the way, to do the rotation. That's not bad. Let's go to the, this is the 3 key. If I hit the, oops, didn't want to do that. If I hit the Control 3, then I get to the other side. So 3 is this side, and now we flip it around to get the other hand. Click on that, rotate it. Use the G key, middle mouse button to move things. That figure's coming together pretty well now. All right. So we have the figure. Now there's a couple things that we need to do now. Well, first is save, of course. And we've saved our figure. Now we want to group this so that we can work with this. All right, so what I'm doing now is I'm going to use my bounding box again. Select everything, and now go to Object, and then hit Create New Group. The group's name is going to be Lego Lady. which is fine. Everything turns green. So now everything is in that same group. Now that's important because we go out of the X-ray view into here. Lego Lady here stands as a group, and I can then select everything, even though they're all here as left leg, right leg, and all this kind of stuff. If I just want to select the group, I go to Groups, and then the Lego Lady's a group, and I can do my selections that way. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to parent. Okay, so the way that you do parenting is you say, I want to make the torso the child of the hips. So I selected the torso, let me try it again, then right-clicked and shift-clicked on the torso. I'm sorry. So what you say is, I want to make, what you say is, I want to make the torso, and you right-click on it, the child of the hips. And you shift and right-click on the hips. And then you go to Parent, which is Control-P, and set the parent to the object. Deselect with the A key, and now when I move the hips, the torso follows, but the torso is independent. So the hips is what will move the object. That then allows you to be able to bend the torso when it wants to move. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to set this leg as a child of the torso. So I right-click on the leg to select it, then right-click on the torso with a shift, and then Control-P, set parent to object, and that means that the leg can move independently, but when the torso moves, the leg now moves. Same thing here. Deselect everything with A, right-click on that other leg, and shift right-click on the hips, and then Control-P, set parent to the object. Once again, as I move the hips, everything moves, but I still have the ability to move the leg any way I want to. The leg can move, and so on. So again, now you're not going to parent the arms to the hips. The arms should be parented to the torso, so you right-click on the arm, shift right-click on the torso, Control-P, object, and now when you move the torso, the arm moves, but when you want to move the arm, it's independent and it can rotate. And now we want to do the hand, but we want to make the hand right-click and shift parented to the arm, hit Control-P. That means again that we can move the hand if we want, but when we move the arm, everything stays. Same thing here, we take right-click this arm, shift right-click the torso, hit Control-P, parent that, shift right-click on the hand, right-click on the hand, shift right-click on the arm, Control-P, and now we have the hand moving. So now, and the head, we have to do the head. Let's not forget the head. The head should be right-clicked, then shift right-click to the torso, then Control-P. And now, when we move the hip, the whole figure moves. When we move the head, it can move independently. When we move the torso, the whole torso moves. When we move the arm can move independently. So our figure now is parented so that we can do an animation of the whole figure moving just by moving the hips to take everything, but we can also do animations where we move just the arm up and down. And you notice something happens here, and I'll go into the Z. The pivot point, which is this little orange dot, is not set where it would really pivot an arm in actuality. And if I hit the 3 key and I'm in orthogonal, oops, move this down, hit the 3 key. Actually, the pivot point should be here. And I also noticed that my positioning is wrong. That line should line up with that circle there. That's what the That's what the X-ray view lets you do. So what I want to do is I want to put my cursor right where I want the geometry to be and go Object, Transform, Origin to 3D Cursor. And now it's a little bit better, but if I go to the one view, you see that it's over to the right side of the arm. It shouldn't be there. So let's do the same procedure here. Click over there in the 3 view. Make sure that it's where we want it to be. And go to Object, Transform, Origin to 3D Cursor. You're going to have to do this a couple times to make this work, because you're working in 3D space. And it's a pain in the butt and very hard to get that cursor in the right position. So the best way to do it, it turns out, is to go into, let me hit Control 3 so I'm on the other side here. It's to go into the negative space. The best way to do that is to go into edit mode. So when you're in edit mode, you can actually select the actual vertex that you want to make the pivot point. And when you've selected that, you then can go and hit Shift S, which says snap, and then say cursor to selected. Now the cursor is in exactly the right place. And once you've done that, then go into object mode and see the pivot point's way down here, and it needs to be where that 3D cursor is. Now you can go to Object, Transform, and do Origin to 3D Cursor. And now that you have that in the right place, when you want to move it by hitting Rotate, the arm rotates along the pivot point. Oops. Of course, the rotation depends on what view you're in. Here it moves just fine because I am in the right orthogonal view. If you are moving in another view, like with something that is not orthogonal, then when you try to rotate it, you're going to have weird motions. So you want to constrain that movement. One way, if your creature is lined up, as this one is, so that his face is, and let me go back this way. Let's go into here. This always is a problem, getting these things, these windows to go. Let's move that over. So because I've lined it up so that he's facing the y-axis and he's along the x-axis, if I choose to do my rotation by hitting R and X, then it moves only along the x-axis. So you have that option as well. So that's the issue with the pivot point. Same thing with this leg here. You can see the pivot point is down here, and we really want it up here somewhere in the middle. That's going to be a little trickier because we go into edit mode now, and we see the places. That's not bad, actually. That's pretty good. You can put the pivot point there. Maybe we'd actually want to get it inside somewhere, and that wouldn't be easy to do. So if we make that the pivot point and we hit Shift S, and I think Shift S is in snap. There it is there. It's mesh snap, and you can snap the cursor to selected, and there it goes. There's other snaps that you can do, obviously. You can do selection to grid, selection to cursor. Here we're doing cursor, cursor to center, cursor to active, or cursor to grid. Well, we're not using the grid. Center puts it in the center of the actual object. That's why we don't want to use that. So the best we can probably do for this is cursor to selected, then go back into the object mode and go into, that's where it's going to be in there, and then go to object transform origin to 3D cursor, and there it is. And when we try to move the leg, now the leg rotates. Now get out of the X-ray mode, and you can see now the leg can do its walking like that. We need to do the same thing with this leg, because right now it's very awkward, with the pivot point being this orange dot here. So we go into edit mode once again, we select the mesh. You can use X-ray if that makes it easier for you. Seems like that's the best central point to use. And then again, mesh snap, which is Shift S, cursor to selected, go tab into the object mode, and then do object transform origin to 3D cursor. And now it pivots better. Z takes you back into the non-X-ray mode, object mode, and then the reason he was going weird there is because I didn't constrain the axis. Once again, if I do RX, then it doesn't matter how I'm looking at it. RX means it's going to go on that red line. That's how it's going to swing. In another tutorial, we'll get into how to constrain the motion so that it always goes on the right axis. But this will work for now. And because of the way we've parented this thing, you can see that when I rotate, well, that's weird. Did I not do the arm? This one here is rotating around the cursor. It's bizarre. That is bizarre. The pivot point. That's why. Pivot point I had selected at 3D cursor. It should be at the, pivot point should be the individual origins. There we go. So that's another feature to pay attention to. What have you done down in the actual pivot point? And now, because I've changed it back to the object origins, we get pivoting on those. Okay, so that gives us our basic motion, except for the head. The head needs a pivot point as well. You could say that the head could be constrained just by hitting R and Z, but again, you see it's not pivoting around the center of the neck. So if the head were to turn, it would look really, really awkward. Everything is awkward. So again, you'll want to go into this mesh mode here. It doesn't look like there's any good points to select for that. So this could be a problem. We could, I suppose, so we have to go into edit mode by hitting tab, come in here, there's a center point, that's not too bad. And once we've done that, Shift S for snap, cursor to selected, and since we've done cursor to selected, we can go tab into object mode, go to object, go to transform origin to 3D cursor. That's where the origin is now. And so since the origin's there, if I hit rotate, but I rotate along the Z-axis, it now turns perfectly well. Okay. So that's setting it up. I guess we could also set up the torso turn, but the torso center of the object seems to be fine, because if we do the torso and we do rotate on the Z, he twists like this. That's a bit awkward, but maybe that's because of the way the hips are. And it's not really much we can do about that because of the construction of this. If we did the torso and we rotated RZ, then the whole body simply turns. So there's a lot more tweaking you can do, but this basically will enable us to make this figure walk a little bit. Now, you could, and let me close this up, drag back that way. You could leave this character, I'm going to save, you could leave it on layer 2 and then just shift click layer 1 to put it in so that you could get your render. I'll hit F12 and you can see the rendering now. That's certainly feasible, or you can bring it into layer 1. I think it's better to work with separate layers. It makes things a lot less cluttered. You can work on your lights and camera and plane on layer 1, shift click. You can always just click on the layer you want to work on. While we're on this, we have some, of course, coloring that we can do. If I shift click the legs and go to material, I can give this a material, and let's give it an awesome purple color. Looks like you can only do one at a time. However, here, if I hit add, there should be data from object. Oh yes, dropping down here, there it is. That's the material that I created. So I can have the same material. Here's the hips. Let's make these the same material. Material 2. Let's go to the arms and give the same matching material. And then the dress we can make a different color. Let's give it another material. Let's give it a more green, yellow, I think yellow. Looks nice for this. And then the hands need to be a skin color. So for a skin color, let's choose a brownish color. And once again, that's already been created, so I can color that and color the face with that same material. These names, by the way, you can change. So I'll call this skin tone, and when I click on this, material 3 becomes blouse, and click on material 2 and you have jumpsuit underneath the blouse. Okay. So there is that. And to make the figure actually walk, you see, by the way, I'm going to hit F12 and render. Oh, there's no lights because I didn't turn on the layer with the camera. I go to 0 to get the camera view. This is what the camera will see. I hit F12 and there we have our figure. So the last thing we're going to do for this tutorial is make a basic walk, and we will have the character walk up to the camera, and the way we'll do that is we'll go into view control 3 so that we see the character. There's the camera here, character is here. The first thing we'll do is we're just going to slide the character to the camera without doing any leg motion, because we have the hips, and remember the hips, everything is parented to the hips. So what we will do is we will set a keyframe here. This is the down here is the timeline, but it is better to do your keyframe setting in the animation mode rather than in this mode, because it's harder to work with the keyframes. You can't edit them. So go here where it says default, get out of default mode, go to animation. Animation is really cool because animation gives you an area where you can see the keyframes, an area where you can work with your characters, and it gives you a camera's perspective so you can see what this camera here is actually seeing. So I'll go in, I will take the hips, and I'm going to move my character back to the beginning of that plane that I created. And by moving my character back to the beginning of the frame, you can see now that the camera is only looking at the character's feet. I don't want that. First thing I'll do is set the keyframe for the character's location. So I hit I, and then I click on location. Now that keyframe goes in, except that I'm at the wrong place in the timeline. I want to be at 0 down here, and I'm all the way at 130 for some reason. So I need to make sure I set that to 0. So let me just come up here and hit X and delete keyframes, and let me move my cursor around the timeline back to 0. Now I hit I and location, and these keyframes appear up here. It says hips, and then it says location. So you have the hips location being set. And then I'm going to have this character walk up to the camera all the way until it's got a nice big face who can talk and say something to the camera here. You can see over here how big that is. And so that's going to happen over, let's say it's we're doing at 15 frames a second for limited animation. So this is 2 seconds at 30. Let's have him walk across 1,000. Let's see if he went 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,004, 1,005, 1,006, 1,007, 1,008. It's about 8 seconds. So 8 seconds at 15 frames a second, and we have 120. So if every, yeah, okay, so 120 or so be fine. And we will now move the character up there and then hit I and hit location. And now the character, if we hit play, the character moves toward the camera. And if this animation is only 120 frames long, I need to set 120 there so it'll loop around, go back to the beginning, hit play, and you can see over here how the character approaches the camera. Now the problem is the camera's stationary. We want to then animate the camera. So I'll click on the camera either here or here. And once I've clicked on the camera and I go back, I'm in a different timeline. I'm in the camera's timeline. And nothing shows up here. This is still looking at the hips where they're moving. I'm going to create another keyframe for the camera, but I want to rotate that camera. And remember, we locked the rotation of the camera. I'm going to unlock the x-axis because that's the one I want to rotate on. And I find that it's a little hard sometimes to just use the drag button. Sometimes it isn't. You can also rotate by dragging along the numbers if you want to be more precise. But let's say that we start out the view here and hit I and then do rotation. And notice that over here now it says that the camera has some keyframes right here. These are the overall keyframes there. Then the camera has a keyframe, and then the hips have keyframes. And I'm going to then take the character all the way up to the end of the sequence, and the camera now is rotated the wrong way, so I can rotate like this and get a camera view like that. The other thing though is notice that now it's looking down on the character. This is where you might also want to unlock the z-axis for the camera, and for your new keyframe, bring the camera down and rotate up. And that way you have a better shot. Now you hit I for rotation, but you also want to change the location. So go to LOCROT, location rotation, and set those keyframes. And what do you have now? Of course, back there, the camera has a different rotation, and we didn't set a keyframe for the location of the camera there. We had the camera up here to begin with, and if we want to, we can now just set the location so that now the camera actually tilts down, tilts and moves down as it comes in. So when you play the actual scene, by clicking on the play button, the character walks up to the camera. But wouldn't it be nice if we could get the legs to move? I'm going to hit A. Stop this. So, to get the legs moving, we can go in, grab the leg at the first frame, and this is going to look a little funky, but I'm going to rotate along the x-axis, so Rx, and I'm going to put a keyframe at the beginning like this, and then take the other leg and rotate on the x-axis like this, and set those keyframes I for rotation, and here an I for rotation. And when I move my character, this is a really gross way to do it, not fine detail. Oh, I want to move my character. When the character gets to here, I can take that rotation and I can rotate it that will not work. So as I move through time, I can, let's say every second, so every 15 frames, I can change the position of those legs and set that rotation. This may have some funky results, so let's see. So now, there we go, it does that. And we want to loop that. I don't know exactly how to do that yet, so I'm just going to keep doing the same motion, going up to 30, and at 30 frames, I will rotate this forward and then go into this mode so I can see my other. Let's see. So at 30, I'm going to set this leg keyframe rotation in X, bring it back, and take the back leg and rotate it forward. And now select both of them and say rotation. Let's see if that did it. Yes, we have switch, switch. And the same thing at 45. I will rotate Rx, rotate Rx to constrain the rotation to the x-axis. Select both of them, hit I, do rotation keyframe, go on to 60, and do the same thing. Select Rx, move this back. Select the other leg, Rx, move it forward, and now keyframe that rotation and do the same thing at 75, and you're definitely getting the idea of how we're doing this. And Rx to move this back, and Rx to move this forward, and select both and hit I rotation, check that animation, and then do the same thing at 75 at 90, Rx, bring it back, Rx, bring it forward, select both with shift, right click, I, rotation, and then go up to 105 approximately. You can see down here what the frame I'm on is, and then Rx brings this back, Rx brings this forward, right shift I rotation, and by the time the character gets here, then we can take the legs and bring them to a standstill position and select them, hit I and hit rotation. Now the character walks, and if I get out of the wireframe mode, you can see on the screen from the side, as I go back and then play the animation, hitting this, you see this motion, and of course you can see the camera mode here. You don't see the legs once it's getting closer to the camera, but if you chose to put another camera on it, then you would see it walking the whole way. And that's about all there is to it. It looks too static, of course, and let me put pause here. Of course, the arm should swing in opposition. Any walk cycle would have that, and you might as well put that in. It's not so hard. Go back to your first keyframe. Notice that when you go to the keyframe, this right leg is identified and it lights up yellow, so you can tell where you are in terms of keyframe. So this is right arm, and the right arm can be RX pulled back like so, and a keyframe set, I and rotation. Same thing with this one is okay, we'll leave that there, but we do need to set a keyframe for it. So you click on that and put a keyframe. Now as the character walks, when we get to 1 second in, we rotate this slightly that way, and the other one, oops, the other one in the opposite direction, slightly like that. And you can select both and create your rotation keyframe, and that's going to begin to look a little better. Go up to 30. This is pretty easy because they match the opposite leg. You just place it in opposition to the leg and then select them and do your rotation. Now we go to 45. We can, of course, keep the figure facing us. It's easier to select that way. Select this arm, but if you hit RX, it's constrained, and so you can select it and constrain it and work with it that way. Shift I for rotation, continue on to 60, select this arm, RX constrains it on the x-axis, so you go backwards with that. This one, RX constrains it, so you go forward, and select them both with shift. Rotation, keep going to 75 approximately. I'm not going to have to be too precise here. It's not a robot. RX brings it forward. RX brings this one back. Rotation, come up to 90. Do the same thing. RX, bring it back. RX, bring it forward. And go to 105, we're almost done. And RX, bring it forward. RX, bring it back. Shift to select, I, rotate. And then at the end, the arms can come to rest. Oops, RX, rest. And set the rotation. So now you have a character who looks a little more natural. You can do also fun things like take the head and do an RZ, turn it a little bit this way, set the rotation, come to about halfway, RZ, turn the head a little bit this way, set the rotation, and then when you come toward the end, the character is still RZ, looking around as she walks, but when she gets to the camera, maybe a little bit before she gets to the camera, then make her face the camera full on. And now when you make the character move, the character is a lot more natural, as you can see. And it's when you look at the camera view, it's much more interesting to see the character sort of taking in the neighborhood. All right, well, that wraps it up for today. It's fun, and good luck Legoing in Blender.